Hello, I'm Joseph Birch, and you're listening to Real Religion. My guest this time is a little different than the last few. Um, I'm speaking to James, who is an atheist. Hello, James.
Hey, Joseph, thank you for having me.
Thank you for your time. So, to get started, I guess I'm going to ask you the standard question. Have you ever been involved in religion in your past?
Yes, my mother was raised Catholic and my dad was raised Baptist, and they agreed that we would switch off churches. So I went to both Catholic and Baptist churches until I was probably around 11 or 12, I'd say, until I got my Holy Communion. That was when they were okay with us going on our own schedule. If we wanted. It may have been later than that, maybe 13 or 14.
All right. Would you say that you ever really believed in it?
It's hard to cast my mind back there, but I feel certain that I did. Although I think the term belief could have different connotations there, and I'm not sure whether I treated it as stories I was told that I presumed were true and didn't have it affect me. But I know for a fact that there were times when I tried to speak with God and I genuinely prayed, felt the communal aspect of being in a church, that feeling you get when you're in church and everybody's singing together, which is accompanied often by boredom or wanting to be playing a game or something. But so I have to say that, yeah, I probably believed. I would say with almost certainty I believed, but I can't really guarantee that that's the truth.
All right.
If that makes sense.
That does make sense. So, at what point would you say you started to consider yourself an atheist?
I was probably 11 or 12 when I had the idea, but I didn't have a label for it until much later.
All right. I don't know. Do you remember any specific train of thought that brought you to that conclusion?
I don't remember the train of thought. I do remember, I guess, about a week period where I felt like clearly this is not true. Where
Alright.
where the what I perceive to be the more accurate conclusion is, and by conclusion we'll get to the term, what the term atheism actually means, I'm sure, soon.
Right.
But considering what I'm going to say when we get there, I remember having a feeling that, or at least for about a week, that I was in awe of the realization I had, which was clearly this is not true.
All right. So, yeah, following up on that, I would like to ask you then to define atheism for me.
Atheism means a lack of belief in one or any deity. It means a
Right.
lack of belief in deities, which is different from a belief in the lack of deities. I do not
Okay.
and believe that I cannot claim that there are no gods. I'm not sure it would be scientifically possible.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it depends on how you define God, but the idea of the supernatural, I don't want to know which direction we're going to go, so I'll stick with the atheism concept. Atheism is a lack of belief in a or any gods. I have a lack of belief in any gods. There are subsets of that.
Right.
One is called weak atheism or agnostic atheism or just atheism, which is the lack of belief in any gods.
Mm-hmm.
Agnostic atheist doesn't really make any sense, though. I'm gonna get to this. But there's also strong atheism, also called anti-theism, although that has another meaning as well.
Right.
But strong atheism means a belief in the lack of gods. It is properly also referred to as Gnostic atheism. Theism and atheism deal with belief. Do you believe in a god? Yes, then you are a theist. You may be a polytheist or a monotheist, but you're a theist. If you lack belief in a god, you are an atheist. Gnosticism and agnosticism, not to be confused with capital G Gnosticism, which is an actual subsect of Christianity. I believe it might be Jewish, but I think it's Christianity. But Gnosticism and agnosticism deal with knowledge. To be a Gnostic is to say, I claim to know this for a fact. Okay. To be an agnostic is to say, I don't claim to know it for a fact. So an agnostic theist is, I believe there's a God. I don't claim to know it for a fact. I don't claim to be able to prove it, or to claim that there is a possibility to prove it.
All right.
Which is why agnostic atheist doesn't really make any sense, because if you don't have a belief in something, how can there be a claim of knowledge or a lack of a claim of knowledge? It's like, well, I think that speaks for itself.
Right. So, for you, what you have is a lack of belief in any deity.
Correct.
Okay. So, obviously you draw a distinction between that and having a belief. All right. So generally, go ahead.
Sorry. I wanted to add, I do think that there is a strong argument that if there is a God, it's irrelevant to our existence, but that requires a defining of God as a supernatural, which, and I don't claim there to not be a God. I don't believe necessarily that there is no God. I just lack a belief in deities. But if something is supernatural, it means that it exists outside of the realm we can interact with. It's outside of our understanding, literally outside of our understanding of the physical world and on. It's like metaphysical supernatural, existing outside of our accessible knowledge. Well, as soon as anything interacts with this world, it becomes natural because its interactions are measurable. Only, so if God were to come down and make something happen, he touches the sky and the sky turns green. We may not be able to measure if that was God or how he did it, but we could measure the fact that the sky turned green. And that is measurable, as opposed to truly supernatural or metaphysical, which, I mean, this all depends on definition, so I'm not claiming anybody who's listening believes this, but if it exists outside of our understanding, then what does it matter if it's true? It's basically most hard solipsism, the idea that we are living in a vat. Solipsism is the idea that you could be making all this up, either in your own head or being fed it by somebody else, that all of this is fake that you're experiencing. Hard solipsism is the literal belief that that's true. But if it were true, what does it matter? If we can't access that external world, and this is played on in the Matrix. It's when he's woken up from the Matrix. It's also it plays up a lot of different fictions. But what does it matter? You can't prove it's true or not true, and it's not affecting the world you're in. It would only matter if you suddenly were outside it.
All right. So what I generally do now is I ask people if they're religious, and my guests so far have been, about some of the important figures of their religion. Of course, since you don't have a religion, I'm not going to do that. But I would like to...
That I wanted to add that I appreciate that perspective, and I agree with it. Atheism, there are no tenets that follow from atheism.
Right.
Atheism and other stuff can lead to tenets like confidence in science, confidence in the theory of gravity, and somehow connecting that to I prefer not to believe something that a God just makes it happen. I'd rather, I mean, not that somebody's listening that believes that, but, and maybe that is. So, thank you for having that perspective.
All right. Of course. I would like to ask you though about some historical religious figures. If that's all right, just to get your perspective. So, first of all, Christianity, and obviously you know, given your history with it, and I think it's pretty much common knowledge in most of the world, Christianity centers around the figure of Jesus. Do you think he was a real person?
Let me preface this by saying, even if he was a real person, even if he turned water into wine, even if he said the most poetic, beautiful things, even if he walked on water, even if he died and was resurrected, none of that proves the existence of a deity. That said, I don't know whether Jesus existed or not. It appears to me that there is a good argument that and I don't think you can prove the non-existence of Jesus.
Right.
But I think that there is sufficient evidence to bring his existence into doubt, particularly Richard Carrier, I believe is his name. He talks about euhemerization, which is a thing that was happening a lot around this time in the Middle East, give or take 1,000 years, meaning in that span, that religions were taking their deities and making human manifestations of them. One was euhemerus. There's a whole lot of them. And Judaism was popular in the area, and it would make sense for that to occur. I don't think that if you read Paul's epistles that you would get this impression, but well, I don't want to get into straight up facts because I'm not an expert. The point is, it's my understanding that there's a justified position to say it's explainable how this came about. We've got books written after his death. There are no contemporaneous records of Jesus. I mean, contemporaneous means existing at the same time as. Right. So, by the time Jesus died, there are no records of his existence. And I think people listening who believe would say, well, there were people who saw him, and that that's what the books were based on. Well, courts of law, they don't accept hearsay, and I think the response would be, yeah, but this is back then. Exactly. This is back then. You've got a lot of people who are with an oral tradition. They're telling stories left and right. There's a lot of real figures that are combined. Ultimately, you get religion mixed in, and then somebody writes down their own version of it, and everybody else uses that version, even quoting it, changing it. You've got Matthew, Mark, and Luke completely disagree on certain aspects of it. I believe in one aspect, Jesus is resurrected, and all of the graves are resurrected with him. There's another one where it's just, clearly the one we know is the one where it's just Jesus. There's a lot of inconsistencies, and it makes a lot of sense to me for someone to write a book about the stories people are telling and for it to be extrapolated upon over time. Certainly the texts we have today are not the popular texts we have today are not a representation, generally, of what the original texts are.
All right. That being said, I guess what I want to ask is the central figures of any religion, be they historically real people or not, whether we're talking about Jesus or the Buddha or Muhammad or any other like ancient sort of religious leader. I don't. Do you think that there's anything to be learned from them?
Absolutely. In the same way that there's something to be learned from reading A Song of Ice and Fire, or that's the Game of Thrones series,
Right.
or to be learned from moral tales for children.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean that to be insulting. I'm just trying to make a simplistic example,
Sure.
which is we learn from our experiences, and one thing that our parents do for us is teach us lessons before we have to learn them by making the mistake
Right.
that leads you to the lesson. And reading books or even watching a movie can teach you lessons. And certainly there are good lessons to be had in almost every religion. And I would bet in almost every story, because otherwise, what's the point of telling the story if there's not a point to it?
Right. All right. So, I think that naturally kind of brings me into something that I want to ask. Do you believe then in an objective morality?
That is a easily changeable term, in my opinion, because morality is subjective. If you got three people in a room saying, I promise I won't do anything bad to all of y'all, as long as y'all promise not to do anything bad to me, well, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
But then if they use that in order to go out into the world and subjugate the rest of everybody, those three people to each other are being moral, and they're benefiting from it.
Right.
So morality is subjective because it applies to those you're applying it to. I don't want to put labels on political. If you believe that if somebody believes that if an individual is not capable of providing for themselves, then they should suffer the consequences, the natural consequences, and maybe other people can help him or her. That is a position that somebody can say that's moral. I would side with the alternative, that we are better off in almost every way by helping each other in order to reach a goal collectively. Now, that goal people can disagree on, and that's why it's subjective. Do we want everybody to just have all the pleasures they could possibly have? Are we wanting everybody to be taken care of so that they can go their own way with whatever desires they have, fend for themselves in that sense? Food, shelter, healthcare, education, and clothing taken care of, but if you want a Rolls Royce, you got to get it. And certainly we're limited to certain. So morality is subjective. We get to choose individually, in small groups, as family, or collectively, what our goal is. Mm-hmm. But how to reach that goal is objective. It is way too complex to calculate in our current state, even with all the supercomputers of the world, game theory, psychology, sociology, you name it, all collectively, put everybody together. We're not capable of creating the figuring out the path to get to, you name the goal. Let's say we pick the goal. We're not capable currently of mapping it out precisely to get that goal. And likely, we would change the goal once we realize what it meant to change. We tweak it, just like we do our government, like the Founding Fathers, or like every amendment is to the Founding Fathers' original documents. Mm-hmm. So I believe in objective paths, although they're too complex for us to map them out precisely. I don't believe in objective morality. Morality is subjective. Is it okay to eat a chicken? Is it okay to eat a cow? Is it okay to eat a dolphin? Is it okay to eat a chimpanzee? Is it okay to eat a human if they can't feel it and they don't know what existence is and they're completely gone and you're starving? I mean, these are all subjective. Once you pick the goal, getting there is objective.
All right. So, I mean, I guess the question that arises from that is, for you personally, and I would assume this is true, are there certain moral, rules that you have for yourself, lines that you wouldn't cross, things that you'll always try to do if you can?
Yes.
All right. So, I mean,
You said always, which is an unanswerable because there's
well, right.
unthinkable situations. But yes, there are things I always hold the door open for people. I try to say thank you. I try to feel grateful. I think the feeling's more important. I just helped a friend move. I didn't do that. It's not selfless, but I did it for him. It was a benefit to him. I try to help other people.
Right.
I'm limited, and I'm not the greatest person in the world. I can be an asshole, but who can? I try.
All right. I guess what I want to ask, what is, in your mind, what is the foundation for those things?
I think I already described it. We choose what our morality is, and we don't completely choose it.
Right.
We have innate desires and bad reactions. We're complex things. I don't want to improperly predict where that question is intended to go, but I think we're both aware. It appears to me that people, and this goes for every different kind of person based on their belief or non-belief, it's difficult to be shown things, just shown, let alone proven, shown things that contradict your opinions.
Right.
I believe that scientific studies, psychological studies have generally shown that when people are shown evidence to the contrary of their opinions or beliefs, their reaction is to dig their feet in.
Right.
I believe that it appears to me that religious morality tends to be people it's not tends, it is. It's either people figuring out what they believe is moral, or which is a product of, or being told what is moral. But the third thing, which I think is really my main crux with religion, if I had one, which I don't really, everybody has a right to believe whatever they want, but it's a free marketplace of ideas, so it's important we talk about these things, differences of opinion.
Right.
If you teach somebody from birth that they're supposed to believe something with all of their mind, even in the face of contrary evidence, and to pride yourself on that refusal to bow down, and this is what faith is: belief in something without evidence, and it's held as holy. That does not make you a bad person, but it makes it so that in your head, when you think, of course they did that, they're they're a bad person for, not even bad person, what do I want to say? It's wrong to, I'm going to use homosexuality.
All right.
I think that it is difficult to empathize with people when they like or do things that we would not do or particularly like. So there are places in the world where people eat spiders, huge spiders. I watch that on TV and I go, ugh, that's kind of gross. That does not mean I'm correct in feeling that way, but that is how I react.
Right.
If somebody is sexually interested in something that you do not have a parlance for, is that right? Parlance? No. That you like, it's even more personal. And I think what people end up doing without realizing it is they take the morality they already have and they project it onto the Bible. Christopher Hitchens said this, but he was quoting somebody else. I don't want to say it because it's not fair to say it, and it's not true. There are 43,000 different denominations of Christianity in the world. And in every one of those sects, in every church, in every pew, there are two people who disagree. But to the extent they are willing to feel confident about it, they feel confident that they know what God wants. And that's not completely true. I think a lot of them, when faced with it, would say, I don't know what God wants. Yes, but you can say that, but you have an idea in your mind what God is. And the person across the street feels the exact same passion about their own interpretations. You haven't seen the things I've seen. You hear that in every possible religion. It is, so, last thing. Thou shalt not kill. 10 Commandment. Let's pretend that that's the one rule. Thou shalt not kill.
Okay.
What if you're being attacked? What if your child's being attacked? These are loose. It is impossible to draw a line in the sand. The more detailed you get, the more apparent it becomes. Thou shalt not kill as the primary aggressor. Well, what if you know they're planning on doing it? I mean, I don't have answers to these. My point is that the more you look, the more complicated it gets, and there are not answers for all these questions in the Bible. There may be moral guidance, but ultimately all these questions are answered within our minds. And then we, in hindsight, think, and that's what God would do. Generally. And I don't mean to minimize anybody's opinions. These are all mine.
No, well, sure. I mean, you absolutely can and should share all your opinions. I appreciate it. Some really interesting thoughts there. You kind of answered some of the questions that I guess would have come next, which would be like, whether or not, because I asked you, is there something to be learned from, ancient religious teachers and, any religious leader, and, you said that there is, and I guess the question that would have arisen, I think you've more or less already dealt with it, but I will ask it anyway, is whether or not you think that religions are useful to society.
I think that when you strip religion of all the things that can exist without religion, in my opinion, it is not a benefit. I know that there are people who hold that as their main solace, and maybe they're in a bad moment now, or they will when a bad moment happens, horrible moments. And I wouldn't want to take that away from them. But to me, that tends to be a result of being raised or apologies for this word, but I feel that it's appropriate, indoctrinated into a particular belief system. It becomes central to your actions, your thoughts.
So, and this is just what I've kind of surmised from what you just said, would you say that religious belief can have certain benefits to people on an individual level, but that's because of sort of the mindset that they already have, and that we don't really need religion in the way that we tend to think we do?
That's almost correct. I think the first part I would like to add that I originally said when you strip religion of a lot of the things that I would not qualify as religion. I think religion likely, and it still does, I know there's a lot of churches around my area. I mean, I live in South Carolina. That's
right.
Probably not. those are, I bet a lot of them aren't. But some of them are doing really good things for the community. They certainly have people getting together. They're trying to feed people who need it, or provide clothing to kids, or giving book bags out to kids, and just generally the communal aspect of it. The idea that you can have a group together, and that's how you end up with government. Whether it tends to be an individual who's saying how we should run this, but sometimes it's for the benefit of everybody. You end up with, we would not be where we are today without religion, and I think that religion's a natural product of, I mean, we are where we are because of a religion, but we are where we are because of everything that's happened before. But when all of those things didn't need religion, in my opinion. Now arguably they had to, because we wouldn't be here if everything that hadn't happened before happened. But it could have happened a different way. But government, you don't need religion to have a government. Communal groupings, you don't need religion to have communal groupings. Charity, you don't need religion to have charity. All these things are, I would add morality to that. You don't need religion to have these. So what I was adding to it was, I know that, and this is where you were nailing it, there are individuals that benefit from Christianity, religion, directly. But I feel that the reason they benefit is because they have been there, and it's not always somebody else. Sometimes it's them including it on their own. But yeah, exactly what you said, that it's a benefit to them, but I feel like that is, you're better off finding that elsewhere than religion, in my opinion. And that the reason people seek it is because they've been taught that that's the right thing to do, and they feel it. It's not just like you learn 2 + 2 is 4. It's an inner feel. That's where you go. Like, if I fall down, I'm going to put my hands in front of me. If a person's raised to believe that there's a loving, an omnibenevolent, omniscient, omnipresent God watching you, who cares about you, wants you to be okay, then asking him for help might be the right way to do it, or knowing that you've got an infinite afterlife, which I actually think is ultimately an immoral concept. But the closest thing I have to faith is hope, because I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. I don't know that when I work hard at work, it's going to pay off. I don't know that my friends are going to be my friends next week, but I hope so. Now, I've got confidence in some conclusions I can reach because of things that have happened before, and my understanding of how the world works. Hope is the closest thing I have to faith. Kind of changed topics on you. Sorry about that.
All right. No, that's fine. That's fine. There's a couple of questions that I've been meaning to ask, and you just mentioned something that I wanted to ask about. You talked about the idea of an afterlife, and I guess I wanted to ask, we defined atheism as a lack of belief in any deity, but I guess the question was going to be, do you believe in an afterlife? And if I'm not mistaken, you just said that you'd consider that an immoral concept?
Correct. But those are different things. Like I said earlier, there aren't any tenets that stem from atheism. There are atheist people who believe in Bigfoot. There are atheists who believe in ghosts. There's atheists who believe in an afterlife.
Right.
There's conservative atheists, liberal atheists. They stem across the board.
Yeah.
So I don't believe in, I don't believe in ghosts, Bigfoot, or an afterlife, since those are the three things I said.
All right, yeah. Ghosts were going to be a question, too, so.
Yeah.
All right. Could you elaborate, then, on the afterlife being an immoral concept?
Yes. And I don't mean to say that there's any individual who is intentionally trying to create an immoral concept. It makes sense that an afterlife came about. The idea that this isn't the end. You get to live forever in peace with other people. There are so many different religions with the concept of an afterlife. Even the Greeks and Romans had their own, although it's not quite as peaceful as the one we have. But the Norse mythology, you went to Valhalla, and the men who died in battle went to Valhalla and drank and fought forever until the final battle will come. So afterlife is a concept that it makes sense for it to come about. The reason I feel it's immoral is because it means you're not living for this life. You're living for the next. And in order to live for the next, you have to know what will get you into the next. Sure, there are a lot of people who think, if I am a good person and kind and loving and help my fellow man and work really hard and learn as much as I can, I will appease fill-in-the-blank deity and thus get an afterlife. Those people exist, and I believe those moral predilections are reachable more easily outside of religion. But the Muslim extremists who blow themselves up, which are the vast minority of Muslims, and that was minority with an N, they think they are buying them. Now, I'm sure there are some of them that don't, but the vast majority of them believe that they are buying their way into an eternal paradise. But regardless of how you think you get there, you're not living for now. And think not for the morrow. That is a horrible way to think. In the same way that if somebody tells you to kill your kid, if God tells you to kill your kid, you do it. That's what you do. You do it, and you say, thank you, God, for letting me be your instrument. And that's a different conversation, but it's the same thing. If you believe that something will get you the only gift that matters, if you really believe it, then you have a duty to do it. And that leads in horrible directions. That way madness lies.
All right. So, here's an interesting question that I actually haven't asked anybody this yet. I don't think. I'm surprised it hasn't come up yet. But something about you mentioning you don't believe in which is the afterlife, Bigfoot, or ghosts.
Yeah.
And it made me think, for some reason, of aliens, by which I mean extraterrestrials, not immigrants.
Yeah.
What's your perspective?
On the existence of aliens?
Yeah, on the possible existence of extraterrestrial life, intelligent or otherwise.
Well, going with otherwise, just life in general, and first of all, life is a really difficult thing to define, because where does the line stop? Virus, bacteria. But the way it's generally used in public, I think it is entirely within the realm of possibility that there is no other life in this universe, and it wouldn't mean a thing. It would make us feel good. It's the anthropic principle. You look up in the sky and you say, I'm conscious. I have this life in this body. Why me? There must be a reason for it to be me. But it couldn't have happened any other way. Or every possibility is happening simultaneously in infinite dimensions. And I don't mean dimensions, I mean infinite universes. Let me gather my thoughts.
Sure.
Sorry, I've got two dogs that are bother me a little bit. I lost my train of thought. Would you remind me of the question?
I'm just asking your perspective on the possible existence of extraterrestrial life,
Got it.
intelligent or otherwise.
So what I was saying was it's entirely possible that we're the only ones, and if that were true to me, that doesn't mean anything special necessarily.
Right. Okay.
That alone does not lead to any additional conclusion. That said, it appears almost inevitable that there's nigh inevitable that there is at least some other kind of life in this universe. It seems like there should be intelligent life in this universe. I forget what the name of it is. I'll look it up after this and I can give it to you. You probably know it already. But there's a formula that a cosmologist, I can't remember, came up with to say this is the formula that should predict how likely life in the universe is. We don't know some of these numbers. There's an X here and a Y there and a Z there. We don't know these numbers, so let's presume they're at the low end of the scale. It still seems like there should really be intelligent life in this universe. So why have we not met them? And there's a bunch of different explanations for that. Possible explanations. One being that intelligent creatures tend to destroy themselves before they go intergalactic. That why do they care about us? Neil deGrasse Tyson says we're almost 99% the same as chimpanzees, bonobo chimpanzees. If you were to change 1 more percent, imagine how much more intelligent they would be, and how the scales would tip for the next generation and on. What would they care about us? We're a violent, primitive species. They'd likely just move on. But if you're asking about whether I believe aliens have visited us, and I don't think this is what you were directly asking, but as to that goes, I have not heard an alien abduction story that I believed. I do not think that they are. It is entirely possible that they are watching us and studying us. I see no evidence to believe that that's the case.
All right. So, the way this generally concludes is I like to ask people, how their beliefs and their faith, affects their life. Like we said, atheism doesn't have any tenets in and of itself, but I guess I would like to ask how you feel that this not believing in these things affects your life.
I think the best response I can have for that is that the realization, and I may be wrong, I can't do anything more than I'm trying to do right now in order to convince anybody otherwise. I'm not even saying that that's my goal.
Right.
By realizing how easy it is to be convinced, I both have learned that no one can be blamed merely for believing something. They can't be blamed for possessing that belief necessarily.
All right.
If somebody believes that there's a deity, the best or the worst, they're not choosing to be deceived, if that makes sense. They may be averse to learning. They may, and I'm not talking about the deity necessarily. You have to be averse to learning to believe in a deity. I'm just trying to paint the worst example. They may be averse to learning and choosing to I don't think that they're deceiving themselves intentionally. It's basically the same question as when do you start blaming humans for their own actions? A 3-year-old hits a 4-year-old, you don't cart off the 3-year-old to jail, but at what point do you say you're old enough, you go to jail? I mean, there's 45-year-olds that have the mental capability of 13-year-olds. These are difficult questions, but I don't think you can blame anybody necessarily merely for their And this goes back to the duty we have to each other. In my opinion, we have a duty to every human, and a duty that's not imposed by any outside force. If we want to make a better society, we should compel ourselves to want to educate everybody as much as possible. So, in the first sense, the main thing that I would say to your question is learning that everybody, for the most part, thinks they're justified, and the vast majority of people believe that what they're doing is for the betterment of the world in one form or another. And the second thing is how easily because everybody can be duped. And I feel that I know there are moments where I think, well, hold on, do I know this is true? There's no such thing as absolute knowledge. It's not a thing. Knowledge is justified true belief. There's no such thing as absolute knowledge. Everything ultimately to some unknowns.
Could I just interject right here? When you say there's no such thing as absolute knowledge, are you referring to absolute knowledge about religion questions or about anything?
Anything.
Okay, so that would mean, like, even the most basic...
What's your name, Joseph? What was the name you were born with?
Joseph.
How do you know that? We don't need to go down this train, but
right.
There's no such thing as absolute knowledge. The closest thing we have to absolute knowledge is math, and even that is, there can be alternate, in an infinite amount of, if everything that's possible has happened, then if it's possible for something different than how we understand, then it's inevitable. If that made any sense. If everything that is possible is inevitable, we won't experience it. Individuals won't experience every possibility, but if that's how the universe works, then there may be things as basic as that aren't accurate. One way I can show you what is 1 plus 1. You say 2. I have 2 clay balls in my hand, and I end up pushing them together to make 1. That's an abstract idea. It's not the same thing because you're using different terms. Basically, I'm using different terms when I do that. But absolute knowledge and absolute certainty aren't real things, in my opinion. Math is the closest thing we have. The logical absolutes are the best we have as a foundation to build our knowledge upon, and science is the best method we have for building upon it.
All right. So, sorry, going back to the effects on your life, you were saying you were talking about how easy it is for anyone to be fooled.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add to that?
Anything in particular you're thinking of?
Oh, no, I was just wondering. I sort of stopped you to ask about the absolute knowledge thing. I was wondering if you had anywhere specific you were going.
I think I was on the, yeah, you're right. I was talking about that, I think. I was basically done. I'll wrap it up, that answer, by saying that we are all, I just read a book called Lie Spotting, which talks about how many lies we experience in a day, and it's staggering. And most of them are innocuous, meaningless lies that we hear from other people. But I think I pretty much answered it earlier. Do you recall where I had stopped?
Oh, not exactly. You just said that the second realization was just how easy it is for anyone to be fooled, and because, there's no absolute knowledge, and like you just said, that there's things that are untrue that we're coming in contact with constantly, that anyone can be fooled into thinking something that's not true, and you're not immune to that just because of certain things that you don't believe to be true.
Yeah, that's exactly
And then just
And I may be wrong about my lack of belief in a deity, and I welcome absolutely every opportunity I have to learn the truth. I'm not saying I'm perfect in that I'm capable of discerning between all different scientific opinions or philosophical conclusions. So, but I'm open to being convinced, absolutely. In other words, I don't mean to say that I'm perfect and can and will accept all logical things that are handed to me. It's difficult to tease out what's true and what's not. But I welcome the thought of being proved wrong. I can't remember who it was. I think it was Lawrence Krauss was talking about how once you accept it as something you want, it is a beautiful feeling to have something you hold as truth supplanted by something better. To realize you were wrong and to have a better answer than you did before.
that is very interesting. Going back just a little bit, real quick to the first thing that you said, the consequence of your realization and your lack of belief. You said that people can't really be blamed for believing something that's not true because people usually aren't intentionally deceived. And you said that most people, when they do something, they believe that they're trying to do something good for the world
or for themselves. Something that is in their mind justified,
right?
Even moral, yes,
Right.
but not necessarily the world, because there are people who do things for selfish.
Oh, sure, of course. I guess my question was though, does that make you have more compassion for people?
Then what?
Well, then you might have if you just I know the realization that and the stance that people can't be blamed for a false belief. I mean, there are some people who would say that people can and should be held accountable for having, the wrong ideas about certain things.
It is not okay for somebody to say that offends me and therefore you shouldn't do it. We live in a place that prides itself, and I don't mean just the United States. I mean a lot of the world prides itself on the marketplace of ideas. The idea that any of us could stand on the street corner and spout our opinion, but any other of us is allowed to stand on the other side and scream you're wrong. So you can't. When I say that you can't blame somebody necessarily for their beliefs, I don't mean that they can't be blamed for their actions.
Right. Okay.
But that goes back to the kid hitting the other kid, because at some point we have to draw the line. What's the correct punishment? What should be against the law? All of these things have to be decided upon, and hopefully with the best goal in mind, which whatever that is, to protect everybody or to provide everybody. So your question was ultimately whether it makes me more moral whether it makes me more moral to believe that nobody can be blamed. It doesn't make me more moral. It doesn't make an individual more moral directly to feel that way, but understanding that people are a product of their environment, their genes. Some people have predilections to feel empathy. Some people have predilections to feel no empathy, sociopathy. But at some point we do have to start saying, all right, we can't have a society that allows that. We have to call it right here. I think that it is necessary to understand that we all, for the most part, feel justified in our actions. Even somebody who's aware that what they're doing is wrong is doing what they're doing because something within them compels them to do it. So blame and punishment are two different things in my mind.
All right.
Well, your question was whether it makes me more moral. I don't like the idea of being more moral or less moral. I like there is a higher. You can be more moral um, by striving more to reach whatever you believe is morality, but morality is subjective. So more moral or less moral in that sense is difficult to respond to, um, especially without a comparison. And I am certainly not the most moral person in the world. We all have done stupid stuff. Think back in middle school, and you're like, why the hell did I do that? That was a dumb thing to do. You were a jerk. Um, so I don't really know how to respond to say that thinking that nobody's to blame necessarily for their own beliefs makes you more moral or less moral. Although I think that it's a necessary platform to properly assess how to make people better people, how to make children into better people, and to have a society that is just, but also secure.
All right. I'd actually, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to backtrack a little bit and ask just a couple more questions.
Yeah.
All right. 'Cause I was asking about, you know, whether you believe in certain things that are not necessarily linked to a deity, and we said, you don't believe in an afterlife or ghosts or alien visitations. I guess what I would ask then is, do you have an opinion on what's the most likely alternate explanation for certain phenomena? Like, for example, let's just take ghosts to begin with. People who say that they've seen ghosts. What do you think generally is the most likely explanation for that?
So you're saying if somebody came up to me and said, I saw a ghost, where would my mind go with
Right.
that? Okay. My first thought would be, is this person lying, or do they truly believe that they saw a ghost? And I think that it's easy for people to get caught up in that. You have two people together, and one says, did you see that? Oh, I think I did see that. When it expounds upon that. It's difficult to, it's easy to get caught up in that. Right. So my first question would be, is this somebody, did they believe that happened, or do they not believe that happened? There are people who believe they have seen ghosts, who truly believe it, would swear that they had seen ghosts.
Right.
I think that that's a product of a million different things. People tend to ascribe we are naturally attuned to ascribe agency to things. When we were primitive people, and you saw you heard a rustle in the bushes, there's two different kind of people. There's the person who's going to go, was that something in the bushes? And the other person is going to think, it was probably the wind. Nothing, no consciousness behind it. The one who's going to survive is the one who's thinking, oh my God, it might be something. Because those 20 times that it's not, sure, he looks like a fool. But that one time it's a tiger, he's the one who survives. So we end up, and it helps with interacting with other humans too. Empathy for another person means understanding more often than otherwise what somebody else wants or feels. If somebody breaks their leg and we watch it, the part of our brain that lights up is the same part that lights up for the person who actually broke their leg. We don't feel the same. We don't feel it to the same extent, but we are literally feeling it. We're empathizing with them, and that helps. So this empathy and agency that is a natural result of how we got where we are, it is easy for a person to see something and ascribe agency to it in the current era. And because ghosts it's a part of our zeitgeist, it has been for a really long time. If you asked somebody in the Middle East in 3000 BC, what was a windstorm? I saw a windstorm. It was moving around like it was looking for something. It's got to be a djinn. I saw a volcano exploding. It must have been angry. So when somebody sees a ghost, to me, and they actually believe they saw a ghost, it's a trick of the mind. It's a trick of the mind. And the oddity is, the more you believe in ghosts, the more likely you are to see them. Because you're going to believe, oh, it's a ghost. And then you solidify it. So if if I were to take the example of somebody literally seeing an apparition in front of them, which I'm not so certain is as frequently alleged as as we would think. I saw a ghost. It was a literal person in front of me, and I could see the light through them. That happens very little, and ghost sightings in the first place happen very little.
Right.
I would think it's possible that this person has schizophrenia or some kind of minor mental issue. They might have had a stroke. I don't know. But an alternative is that they are convincing themselves that's what they saw. So the answer to your question is, I don't know. But what's more likely? That there's a consciousness that exists once, and it exists in the ether around us, and that there's been no documentation to ever have any there's been no scientific study ever, peer-reviewed scientific study, and by peer-reviewed I mean by, what peer review means, that has found any evidence for ghosts. So that's where I'm looking for whether ghosts exist. When people tell me they saw a ghost, I'm not going to try to convince them they didn't with, like, in an insulting or passionate way. I might ask them questions like, well, what did it look like? Where was it? And actually, to add to that, the odd thing is, once you start doing that, and this is true of criminals' false confessions, when you start asking them those questions, they fill in the details, and then it becomes a part of their story, which is also how you can trap them later. You create a part of the story, wait a while without mentioning it, and then go over the same area and try to create something different. And if they create something different, it tends to be they're making it up, and they don't even know they're doing it. So that's my answer. The answer is A, I don't know. B, what's more likely? And C, in my own personal experience, if somebody had told me that it would occur, I would walk that path I described. And you feel free to ask some follow-ups, because I'm not sure if that was if I flushed that all out.
I think you did. The only follow-up I really have is, have you personally ever witnessed something that you just have absolutely no explanation for?
Millions of things. I'm in a house and a door creaks when I didn't feel a gust of wind, or you feeling rain on a sunny day. I mean, there's a million different things that I don't have an explanation for. The origination of this universe. The Big Bang seems the most likely explanation, but even its understanding of how we got here ends at a certain point. There's innumerable things I don't have answers for. That if you said happen to me that I can't explain. Innumerable. I mean, but I'm not looking for explanations. I'm looking for explanations on when I expect. I want to paint a picture for you of something that's unexpected, but I'm trying to think of a particular one that I can point to. Yeah, I'll use my mom as an example. You want one personally from me. They're all mundane in my mind, because I'm not, in my opinion, because I'm not presuming it to be one thing or another.
Okay, right.
Go ahead. By being unexplainable, it is therefore unexplainable. But I feel confident in there is likely an explanation, and I feel under that a subclass of that, confident that it's not something supernatural. I have seen no evidence of anything supernatural ever. I have seen things I don't have explanations for.
All right. Well, I think that pretty much brings us to the end of the interview. Is there anything specific that you'd like to add?
Thank you for having me here. I can't think of anything particular, but I think you mentioned that you like to do a follow-up, so I'll look forward to that. We'll try to work out some schedule stuff.
All right.
It was nice to meet you, Joseph.
Right, nice meeting you. Thanks again for being here.